afternoon. I hope you can all hear and see us perfectly. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to today's webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy lives and days to attend this webinar. I hope you'll find it really useful and encourage you to start having a further dialogue with Hourglass and Churchill going forward. If I could start by just asking people to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Emma McCarthy, who's the Managing Director of the Churchill Foundation.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for my introduction. Obviously, I am Managing Director for Churchill Estates Management, which is a management company that looks after our blocks of flats, which are retirement blocks of flats. I also oversee the Churchill Foundation, which has been going for almost 10 years now. We do lots of charitable endeavours throughout all of our residents, throughout our developments. So we've got about 12,000 residents in our developments around the country nationally.
Yeah. Thank you. And next on our guest list from Churchill is Ian Payne, who is the Head of News at the Churchill Foundation.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for having me along today. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, my title at Churchill is Head of News, so I am in charge of all things PR and communication and anything new and exciting that we do. And of course, the Hourglass partnership is one of those new and exciting things that I'm very excited to get involved with. So I could talk a bit more about the Churchill Group and what we do as a group. So we, or we could come on to that later. Do you want me to explain a bit now, or shall we do intros first?
I'm relaxed on the subject. Maybe if we introduce everybody on the panel, then I'll come back to you and Emma to tell us a bit more about the Churchill Foundation and what you're doing and the partnership that we're here today to discuss. Fantastic. So Richard Robinson, Chief Executive of Hourglass.
Yes, as you say, Andrea, I'm Chief Exec of Hourglass. I've been here since 2018, and we, as people may be aware, are the only charity across the UK focused entirely on supporting older victim survivors of abuse and neglect. And I'm speaking to you today from East Anglia, but we're across the whole of the UK.
And then Veronica Gray, who's the Deputy Chief Executive, if you could introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea, and good afternoon to everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So yes, I'm Veronica, Deputy CEO and Director of Policy, and my work for the charity is around policy development, advocacy, lobbying and campaigning. And I am based, although my job is UK-wide with the charity, I'm based in Northern Ireland.
And last but not least, me, I just realised I haven't introduced myself. So I'm Andrea Nicholas-Jones, and I'm the relatively newly appointed chair of Hourglass. I've been involved with the charity since 2017, when I took early retirement from the civil service. And Hourglass, as Action on Elder Abuse, as it was at the time, was the first organisation that I approached to work with, as during my time in the civil service, I'd been so impressed by the work that they'd done. I felt very strongly that this was a charity that I wanted to ensure that I stayed involved with, even during retirement. So if we could hand over now to Ian and Emma, and they can tell us a little bit more about the foundation and the nature of their work, and really just how you're supporting independent and safer aging for those people that you support.
Absolutely. Do you want me to go first, Emma?
Yeah, thank you. I'll jump in after.
So why don't I start by explaining a bit about the Churchill Group, because there are quite a few different strands to it. So we are the Churchill Living Group. We build apartments for the over 60s. We build them all over England and some in Wales. So we're nationwide, but not in Scotland, unfortunately, or Northern Ireland. But who knows what might happen in the future. We've got over 200 developments that we've built and that we continue to manage through our management company, Churchill Estates Management, which Emma's the MD of. And there are probably at least 50 more developments that we didn't build, but we are managing for the long term. And that management is all about enabling those over 60s who live in our developments to live independently, to live hassle-free, to enjoy safety and security in their own apartment with their own front door, but with a built-in sense of community that they can go and enjoy whenever they choose to. So nearly all of our developments will have a lot of social spaces, like an owner's lounge, where they can go and spend time with other apartment owners. They'll all have a development manager or a lodge manager who looks after things, takes care of all the maintenance of the building, and also organises regular social activities for our owners to go and enjoy. So in terms of kind of promoting independence and safety in later life, that is absolutely what we're all about. And as part of what we do, we also, about 10 years ago now, we created our own Churchill Foundation, which probably is the point for me to hand over to Emma, because she was instrumental in doing that. So
thank you, Ian. So the Churchill Foundation has been going for 10 years now, and we have partnered and worked with many charities and organisations over the past 10 years. We're really proud to announce that our partnership now with Hourglass is a 3-year partnership where we're looking to donate, a really good amount of funds to support them and their growth in certain areas around the country. From us, it resonated really well with us, not only in our core objectives and aims as a business and what we do, but also our charity. So our core aims is promoting health and well-being for the older generation and reducing human suffering. And I know that these are the sort of through and through core aims for Hourglass as well. So we just felt that the synergy there was perfect for both of us, knowing that they are the only one charity within the sector that's combating that side. For us, we see ourselves as the spearhead in retirement living in the UK, and we just felt like it would be a really good partnership together. We raised over £2 million as a foundation so far since it's started, and we're hoping to really push and drive that further now with this partnership to be able to strengthen both charities together over the next coming years. Is there anything else you'd like me to go into in a bit more detail at the start there, or did you want to jump into any questions?
No, I think that would be that's ideal for us to lead in really now to Veronica talking about our safer aging agenda and really the high hopes that we have for the partnership with Churchill Foundation and how it's really going to be an excellent initiative for both parties. So I'll hand over to Veronica.
Thanks, Andrea. Well, I suppose from an Hourglass point of view, Safer Aging has really been built into the brand of the charity since 2020. And the reason was that we are acutely aware that older people face physical and attitudinal barriers that create circumstances of actual or presumed age-related vulnerability. So those barriers create the environment in many cases that puts older people at risk of abuse. So our campaign for Safer Aging really seeks to remove those barriers to empower all older people to age safely and live their lives free from abuse. So Safer Aging really, the Safer Aging agenda of Hourglass really moves the charity firmly into the prevention and early intervention work. It also represents a softer agenda which encourages more of the general public to engage with us and engage with what is a very difficult subject, the abuse of older people, and one that so many people don't want to engage with and are happy to ignore. However much we know that abuse of older people is a problem in the UK today, and we know that people are concerned about facing abuse in later life. it's still something where we need a huge amount of attention and focus around awareness raising to get that message out. The more people know and understand this area, then the better protected older people are. So that's where I see, as Emma and Ian, you've already said, that's where I see Hourglass and Churchill just so aligned on that particular issue.
Thank you, Veronica. And last but not least, I'll hand over now to Richard, who'll set out where we are currently as a charity and our priorities going forward.
Well, before I do, actually, I think it might be worth saying that Churchill deserve a great deal of credit for not just their approach to independent living, but also working with a charity like Hourglass, which is a medium-sized charity, 30 odd staff, is very unusual for a very large or a larger company, larger corporate like Churchill, and it will be a truly catalytic partnership in lots of ways. It will be catalytic for us in terms of we will be able to invest more in our frontline services, which is something that we are absolutely determined to do. And I'll come on to why that's so important in a second. But also the work that we're doing with Churchill will also enable us to get that profile out there a bit more. And to put that into perspective, a significant portion of the UK population really lacks awareness regarding what constitutes abuse against older individuals, what constitutes safer aging. For example, I mean, in a study, a survey we did, even 35% of people don't see as inappropriate sexual acts against an older person as abuse. Nearly a third of people that we spoke to don't view physical acts like pushing or hitting as abuse. And so therefore there is a real mountain to climb in terms of trying to get to that society where older individuals can live free from abuse, neglect, and with that societal change and increased awareness that will come with working with an organisation which has a real corporate strategy around safer independent living. It's from my perspective, it's a real obvious synergy, and it's something I think we can build on. So the question you asked, though, is where is Hourglass now? Well, the Hourglass now is actually at the best moment of its 30-year history. We're working very closely with the Home Office, and we're working very closely with the Ministry of Justice, as well as with various police and crime commissioners across England and Wales. And we do have strong partnerships in Scotland and Northern Ireland too. And I think the reason why I think the charity is in such a good moment is because finally, and I really mean finally, there seems to be this understanding that the abuse of older people is as morally unacceptable as any other form of abuse. It's sort of happening. There is a creeping realization. Now, it's frustrating for us in Hourglass that it's still taking this amount of time for people to see that. But the fact that we are being invited to more Home Office initiatives, Ministry of Justice initiatives, we're being asked to take part in things like tomorrow we're sitting on a round table around the COVID inquiry. So I think now is a bigger opportunity than ever for us to sort of put a loud hailer to this message. However, that said, it's not all sunshine and lollipops. We have a lot of work to do to ensure that every part of England, let alone the UK, has a caseworker and a member of frontline service staff for the charity to deal with the nature of the cases that we're working on. We're not able to have somebody on the ground, for example, in the very north of England, and we are working hard to fulfil that. Likewise, in the southwest, which suffers from a a real issue around the isolation, the rural isolation in the southwest of England. So our agenda for 25-26, as we're now in that financial year, I've just reminded myself, is to really work hard to spread the charity geographically, so that across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, we are as visible and as available as possible. And that we know partnerships like this will enable us to do that. And also learn from organisations like Churchill as well. We're not, charities have to be a business in 2025. When I first started working in the charity industry in the 90s, there was a slightly mustier feel around charities. You know, how do you ensure that charities remain innovative and life-changing when actually there's a huge marketplace in the third sector now, an enormous marketplace. So we need to sort of put Hourglass on as big a platform as possible to ensure that the cause, working with older victims of abuse, is sort of in the centre.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you to all of the panelists for those really helpful introductions. We are going to put some questions to the panel. Could I encourage all of the participants to use the Q&A if there are any questions that you would like to ask? So if I could just start actually now by asking asking Churchill Foundation. I think it's very clear from what's been said by Richard and Veronica that clearly safer ageing is the absolute bread and butter business of Hourglass. But for you as Churchill Foundation, what's led you to have this as one of your priorities for action over the next few years?
Well, shall I go first on that one?
Yeah.
I think really safer ageing is already what we have been all about as a business since we started 21 years ago, or more than that now, to focus on specialist retirement housing, because there's nothing more important to safety and independence than where you live. You know, your home, you should be able to be completely safe and independent. Sadly, we know that's not the case for everyone, but we believe very strongly, and we campaign on this, and we do lots to try and educate and raise awareness around the fact that as you get older, particularly if you become widowed, you can get very isolated. If you're, living in a family home, the huge majority of our customers will be people who have lived in a family home that they've had for 30, 40, 50 years. They might suddenly find themselves on their own. Perhaps they're in a rural location, or even if not, you become more and more isolated. And the more isolated you become, the more vulnerable you become. So what we've always been all about as a company is providing communities that are in town centres and that are well connected, where people can still be independent, still be active. We have people, so you have to be 60 or above to live in one of our apartments, but we don't provide kind of direct care services or anything like that. We're all about independence and just providing a space where people can have their own apartment, live their own life, but be around others. Have that lodge manager to look after the development and keep an eye out for them, but also have other people around them and peers and opportunities to socialise if they want to socialise, and that kind of creates safety and independence in numbers, purely by getting rid of that isolation that people can suffer. Having the bigger your network of connections is, the more people you can depend on, the more the lower the chance of you kind of suffering from abuse, or in whatever form that might be, is kind of what I believe and what we believe. So I guess it's always been what we're all about. We would like to think that all of our customers are the lucky ones. They're the ones who have taken that brave decision, because downsizing is a big decision, and moving when you get into your 70s and 80s is a big move at any age. Moving house, it can be stressful. It's a lot, but when you've got a lifetime of possessions and memories that are tied up in a home, it's a very brave move to leave that behind and move somewhere new. But I spend a lot of time talking to our owners who have done that, and they're so glad they did it. And I hear all the time, I don't know why I didn't do it sooner, or it's the best thing I've ever done. And it's real music to our ears to hear that kind of feedback. And these are people who have taken that decision, made that move, and are living safely, independently, surrounded by new friends, enjoying new experiences, new freedom, and thankfully, not in danger of abuse that they might have suffered from otherwise. So that's kind of that's kind of where we're coming from, and where we always have been coming from in terms of safety, independence, confidence, and peace of mind as well, which is just so important. You want to enjoy your retirement if you're retired. Not all of our owners are retired, I should add. We've got plenty of people in their 70s and 80s who are continuing to work or volunteer in their local community, but not having to worry about maintaining a garden or fixing a boiler, fixing a leaking roof. We take away all those worries so that they've got a nice, safe apartment in a safe place with other people, where they can feel that they're looked after by their peers as much as anything else. So that's something we've always strongly believed in, and we've been looking for quite a while for a charity partner that we can create a real meaningful relationship with. And I have to, hands up, confession time. When we first came across Hourglass, I hadn't heard of Hourglass, and it's ridiculous that I hadn't, because what you guys do is so important. So yeah, we really believe in kind of working together with you. We've got a huge network, over 10,000 customers across England and Wales, that we can share that awareness with about what you do, because you can guarantee that there'll be some of our owners who have either experienced abuse in the past, or they might have friends who are experiencing it now. So it's an opportunity to share all the important work that you do, and just raise a lot more awareness about Hourglass as a charity and how important your work is. So that's what we're excited about.
Thank you, Ian. Emma, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think Ian has definitely sort of covered a lot of bases there. And I think from the charity point of view, our views have always been quite widely spread of like who we support from a charitable aspect, and we always get a lot of feedback from our owners about the type of charities that they like to support also. And I would also mirror Ian's views in terms of when we were looking for our charity partners going into this partnership. I also hadn't heard about Hourglass out there, and I just think, wow, how can we get Hourglass more established more widely? Because we are in the industry, we are quite well known within the industry in terms of that retirement sector, and it's not down to the service that Hourglass doing, because they're doing a fantastic service, but why isn't it on everybody's front of mind in terms of this charity? Because there is a lot that we should be and could be doing for the charity and for the sector. And I think that the partnership is only going to get stronger. And I think we were always wanting to go down a route now of, right, this is our business and this is what we do day to day, but how can we make sure that charity we pick and support also mirrors what we do day to day in terms of trying to support people better in their later years of living, and really make the most of it. And I know that Hourglass do such a fantastic job for people that are going through real hard times and trying to get them more support where needed. And we want to be able to do that too with Hourglass, and really create that strong partnership together. And I feel that it just mirrors what we do really well in terms of creating safe living.
Thank you both for those really comprehensive answers. Richard, is there anything that you would like to, or Veronica, is there anything you'd like to add before we maybe move? We've got two quite interesting questions in the Q&A that I'd like to put to the panel.
I suppose the only other point I would make is that everything that's been said about safer aging and safer and independent living, it also chimes with what the World Health Organization are talking about as well at the moment around safer spaces. And now I have no idea what came first, whether the World Health Organization been working on this for some time, or whether this was something that Hourglass are working out independently. I know Veronica first started talking about safer aging in 2020. So anything that chimes in a microcosm like the UK is certainly something which is going to become more and more important globally as we look at safer spaces for older people, especially as we know that there is going to be a population growth in the UK of older people, a huge population growth. Now, I don't want to use a webinar like this to sort of kick the government, but because I think no matter what government's in charge, there's always going to be a degree of conscious or unconscious ageism. And now we know as a charity that the current government has set an objective of trying to halve violence against women and girls in their term in Parliament, term in government. And I'd be very interested to see what data they're going to use to work out how they can also halve violence against older people, violence and harm against older people, because as that population growth happens, there is going to be an explosion in cases of abuse as well. So safer spaces, independent living and safer aging are going to become more and more relevant as the years go on, which is why we set up this Oath campaign, which we've been running now since the conference in Brighton last year. And I think it's really important that just as the government is trying to halve violence against women and girls in a decade, we're aiming for a safer aging society by 2050. And that may seem like an awful long way away, 2050. But actually, if you think about how long it's taken the governments we work with across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland to even recognise the issues around the abuse and harm of older people, it's actually going to be a real challenge to get to a safer aging society by 2050. So it's an aim, it's a realistic aim, and I suppose I should say that anybody who hasn't signed the oath, it's time to do so, because it would be really good to try to get more and more people to sign that campaign aim, so that corporates and people, as well as parliamentarians and influencers, really get behind our mission for that safer aging society by 2050. So yeah, that's probably useful for me to add that.
And I think the first question actually neatly leads us to a clarification really about what the partnership between Hourglass and Churchill Foundation is looking to tackle. So the first question is from Bridget Penhale, and she's just really asking for clarification around whether the Safer Independent Living campaign will apply to those who are not able to live independently. And is it worth us thinking possibly about how we rephrase that so that people will understand that actually it's for all older people to live safely, not just looking at it from an independence perspective. And I think that's really critical. So I think we forget sometimes that even when older people move into what we would broadly categorize as an institutional setting, independence can still be facilitated and should be encouraged and supported. Yeah. So it's a bit semantics, but I do think it's an important message. We want to ensure from both partners' perspectives that the campaign is fully understood.
I'll say the first thing. I think Veronica's probably got something to say about that as well. But it's worth saying that whilst we and the Churchill Foundation or Churchill Living are working closely together, the charity's role is about promoting safer and independent living, independent aging across the whole of the UK to everybody. So our role as a charity is focused on everybody, providing services as much as we can for everybody. This relationship, this partnership with Churchill is a microcosm of that. Bridget, who was one of our first trustees when we launched in '94, I think she might have been the first vice chair of the charity. So thanks for the question, Bridget. Is absolutely right. This isn't semantics. Everybody has a right to age safely, whether they can move into accommodation or not. Everybody has a right to age safely and independently. And we as a charity are absolutely focused on that need, which is why I mentioned the World Health Organization about safe spaces as well. Churchill's approach is just one approach. We're completely aware of that. We are not trying to suggest that Churchill should be building homes for everybody, whether they can afford it or not, because that's not a business model for anybody. But we want to work with anybody that wants to see independent living as part of their agenda. We want to work with everybody in that space. But this is just one very headline partnership which enables us to make that challenge.
Thank you, Richard. Veronica, is there anything you'd like to add?
I suppose just to really underline that, we are here and we want to support any older person at risk of or experiencing any and all forms of abuse. So just to underline that, so regardless of whether that's in a community setting, in their own home, in independent living situations, which actually older people are most at risk of abuse living in their own home in the community, and we can't ignore that fact. But also we do have an offering as Hourglass for older people who are living in those institutional settings as well. We provide services right across the piece. And I think that's what makes Hourglass quite a unique charity as well, because we have got out there are lots of really excellent organisations and charities focused completely on the domestic abuse arena. But that's where I think Hourglass has even more added value, in that we go that extra step as well.
And that actually leads us really neatly into the next question, which is from Bob Green Tonic. And what's the partnership going to do to ensure it meets the needs of all residents, for example, those from the lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender communities? And again, I think this is the unique space that Hourglass fits, because we don't just provide services for women who are victims of abuse. We look across the piece. So I'll hand over to Richard because this is my favourite hobby horse at the moment, I have to say. So I'll hand over to others before I get carried away with a diatribe on it.
We are part of a community of charities and organisations across the whole of the UK and beyond, who provide that opportunity for safer ageing within an for older victim survivors. But also we work with other charities that are, for example, Gallup are an organisation we would work with from an LGBTQ plus perspective. Gallup do a fantastic job. In fact, I believe I'm working with them tomorrow on the COVID roundtable, and I can't commend Gallup enough. They do a fantastic job, and of their growth in their calls has been huge. So if somebody comes to us seeking support and has a particular specialist need, we would reach out to one of our partners to ensure that we can offer the best possible service. And as I say, Gallup would certainly be the place we go to from an LGBTQ plus perspective. But this is safer ageing by 2050 is for all, but domestic abuse also affects everybody. And that's what we need to underline. That's why I made the point about VAWG, about violence against women and girls. We have to remember that well over 40% of our calls and contacts come from men. And whilst I don't have the stats to my fingertips, we also deal with other poorly served communities. There's an old phrase which is called hard to reach communities. Now, one of the issues around hard to reach communities is how hard do you try to reach those communities? And that's a lesson that lots of charities have really fought hard to deal with, and not just charities either. So I thank Bob for his question. It's an absolutely fair question. And I think that's the point of being in a patchwork of charities across the domestic abuse sector and across the safer aging, safer living sector. And whilst we may be the only one in this particular space, there are others within the domestic abuse, domestic violence space as well.
Thank you, Richard. Veronica, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, and I suppose just really partnership is so crucial, because older people are not just one homogenous group, and there are different intersectionalities that we need to be so mindful of whenever it comes to abuse of older people. And that's why collaboration is one of our aims all the time. We're always seeking out those new partnerships, those new opportunities to work with other organisations, because there's enough work to go around. There's enough work for us all to do. But by doing it in partnership, I think we'll get a lot. I think we'll be able to deliver a better service.
Thank you. Ian, Emma, is there anything you'd like to add to that from the Churchill Foundation perspective?
No, I think really just to echo what Richard and Veronica have said, we as Churchill, we build communities that are open to everyone and everyone's welcome. And by supporting Hourglass to do the excellent job they do, we want to help them to build their capacity to help as many different people as possible. So we're just pleased to be able to support that.
And I'd like to echo that point to say it is my hobby horse at the moment, because I'm very well aware from research that we've undertaken specifically in Wales, which is where I sit, that the larger domestic violence and abuse against women charities in particular will focus in on women and don't necessarily look more broadly at violence against men, violence against disabled people, for example. And we're very well aware that a lot of the facilities, again, that we have, and I can only speak on Wales' perspective because that's where I've undertaken the research, we don't even have facilities in hostels or within support services to support any of the protected characteristic groups. So, charities like Hourglass and the work that's been done by you in the Churchill Foundation to be supporting the safe aging agenda is absolutely critical, because public services aren't necessarily stepping up to the plate in this particular area. The next question, I think, actually is going to be for Ian and Emma, and that's Siva's iPhone has asked, if Churchill is providing accommodation for independent living, what happens to your residents if they have to have support from caregivers or if they lose their capacity? I don't know which of you would like to answer that, or maybe both of you.
I'm happy to jump in there. So from our side of the business, the property management side of the business, we have a core team that are based operationally around the country, and of that, everybody in each development has a lodge manager that are based there to support all of the residents within the development. That said, if somebody needs further support day to day, then it is something that they can get sourced externally, and that can come into their apartment. We do say if you can live independently, whether that's with care or without care, you are still living independently. So we fully support that in our developments.
Thank you. I think that's such an important point. We just need to remember what we mean by independent, don't we? So you can live an independent life where you have choice and you have agency, even if you require substantial levels of support to achieve that. Yeah. So at the moment, we've got no further questions in the question and answer box. So I'll really just move on to what I think is quite an important question. And I think this is possibly, again, a bit more of a Churchill question, so apologies. We are aware that abuse in elder age can often start at times of transition when people are going through a period of change. So really, how do you as an organisation ensure that when people are transitioning into accommodation, you are thinking about such things around whether the individual's been coerced, whether they've been victims of any other form of domestic abuse and violence. And if you identify that, how do you then deal with it?
Yeah, shall I take this one? It ties in a little bit to the last question in terms of how you define independence, and we did a lot of research around this last year when we actually changed our name from Churchill Retirement Living to just Churchill Living to emphasise the living aspect of what we do, and some of the really interesting research that we got back around that idea of independence. It means choice for people. It means being able to make your own choices, even if that choice, even if you've got a limited range of choices about what you're doing with your life and how you're living it. It's really important that you still have ownership and choice about what you're doing. And that is absolutely the case when it comes to choosing where you live. And I talked a little bit before about what a massive thing it is to move house at any age, but particularly as you get older. I think what I would stress the importance of from the customers that I speak to is the ones that make that choice sooner are the ones that fare better. So I think there's quite a lack of awareness generally, and it ties into the whole kind of unwillingness to engage with the nature of getting older. None of us want to admit that we're getting older. None of us want to admit that our choices might be getting reduced. But quite a lot of people leave it to the point where they have to move somewhere that's got care facilities, and they narrow down their choices by wanting to stay put, which is a completely understandable thing. You want to stay in your own home. I've always lived here. I don't want to move. It's almost like accepting defeat to admit that you maybe can't cope, or that you need a more manageable home. So a lot of people leave it until they get to crisis point. And that there's no choice, and then that is the point where relatives might be very well-meaning, but they will come in and they will make decisions for you, and they will put you where they think you need to be. And that quite often it might be in a more institutionalized kind of setting. So the earlier you can take ownership of those choices, I think the better. And making a positive move that is your decision is really, really important. And it always works best when you get buy-in from family members, when you can kind of bring people on the journey with you. And we see it from both sides. Sometimes it will be a son or a daughter who has seen a Churchill development near them, and they think, oh, that would be just right for mum or dad. I'll get them along to see it. It can work that way. Or sometimes it will be the mum or the dad who sees this place and goes, right, I'm moving there no matter what. And then we have to kind of bring the family on the journey with us and explain the benefits and just make sure that everyone's buying into it together. But it's all about communication, and it's all about making sure that everyone's aligned. But ultimately, it's down to that person who's making that decision. It's their choice, and that's what being independent is all about, isn't it? Maintaining your own choice over what you're doing and not being coerced into things against your will. So hopefully that kind of answers that question.
Yeah, and I think to jump in there as well, I think from our perspective, when a new owner moves into one of our developments, we put a really structured plan in place for them. So it's sort of like a 2-month process from the date they moved in to support them on their move-in journey. And they're just touch points with the development manager to make sure that they feel safe and secure, and that they're introduced to people within the development. We also have our care line service, which is in all of the apartments from a safe and security point of view, that they've got there to hand. And we make it very clear and very aware that this shouldn't be some big scary thing in your apartment that you don't ever go near or don't touch. Please feel free to use it, because that's what it's there for. Even if it's just that there's a leak in the bathroom and you don't know what to do, we're there to support and guide some people through that. And I think a lot of people think you move into a retirement flat and you know, that care line service is just there for one need and one need only, where it's actually a lot wider. And, you know, our care line service are also trained up just in case they do hear things that are going on in the background in apartments when call-ups are happening of those risk areas that I know Hourglass deal with so well. They're also trained in too. But yeah, it's a full sort of process of making someone feel really welcomed into the development, even though it's still their own apartment. It's doing that full service at the beginning to really feel like they're safe and secure when moving in.
Thank you. Richard, Veronica, do you have anything to add?
Okay.
No. In that case, I'll move on to the next question. And I think that follows on quite nicely, actually, from what you've just been saying, Emma, and that we are aware that loneliness in older age is a huge risk factor, not just in terms of the impact it has on an individual's mental health, but actually on their physical health and well-being as well. And this question's sort of got two parts. So it's really just, as an organisation, Churchill, what has your experience been of people moving into your facilities and experiencing loneliness and isolation? And what do you do as an organisation to tackle that? And how do you think Hourglass can be working positively with you to be tackling that really difficult issue?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an easy one to answer that, because we would like to think that when people move into one of our developments, they get rid of that isolation. You know, that they are. It's a great thing to see, and I know that a couple of your team members have kind of visited one of our developments to see this in action. But people are suddenly surrounded by new friends, and even if they like to keep themselves to themselves in their apartment for some of the time, some people surprise themselves by how sociable and outgoing they'll be, or they become. So it does really help to tackle that problem once you move in. You've also got the lodge manager there. Part of the lodge manager's role is to do a regular kind of welfare check and just make sure that everyone's okay. And I was at one of our developments in Southampton last week talking to the lodge manager about what her kind of day-to-day routine looks like, and she was talking about how she'll do the walk around in the morning. She'll just, particularly the apartment owners who she know live alone, she'll just check up on them, just let them know what's happening in the owners' lounge later that day, just see if they just gently encourage them to get involved, and just do that kind of welfare check and make sure they're happy. Which, you know, having that as part of the service really kind of helps to address some of those potential issues that could come along.
I think that's so important, isn't it? Because I think sometimes the perception is that there's lots of activities going on, but actually that doesn't mean that people will necessarily participate. Because if you've been lonely and isolated in the community for a number of years, then actually it's all too easy for that loneliness and isolation just to be transferred to be being behind a different door. So I think it's really, really positive that, you know, you do take that opportunity to be encouraging people to get out into the new community and participate. That's really, really positive. Emma, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
My computer froze for a moment or two, so I didn't actually hear the question.
Oh, well, it was just around really how you're tackling loneliness and isolation in your communities. And I think Ian's answered it very comprehensively.
Yeah, I think from my side, it's just that, like Ian mentioned about creating those communities also become a safe space for people to talk and people to open up and have more people surrounding them than they would have done in their own homes. It's the fortunate position that's what the developments that we build bring to them, of creating those community feelings, to be able to have that time to build relationships and connections.
And this could be scripted, because that actually leads us beautifully into the next question, which has been asked by Joe Jacobius, which is around what Churchill Living is going to be doing to actually be ensuring that all of your residents are aware of Hourglass and the services and support that we can provide to them should any issues be bubbling.
Well,
for
we're
them.
definitely introducing some of the Hourglass colleagues to our colleagues. So not only from an awareness point of view, but also from what expertise Hourglass has and the demographic of our owners. It's really important that we're learning from Hourglass too. So we're definitely going to be getting that support from the Hourglass team, just to make sure that we're keeping our eyes open to anything that we should be being aware of. But vice versa, the other way around is that we do coffee mornings every week. It's always our opportunity to launch new partnerships that we have and continue to do that. So we'll be doing events throughout the year with Hourglass, and whenever we do these type of events, we always try to make sure that we are getting the most out of them. So whether it's we have some of Hourglass's colleagues attend some of our developments around the country over the course of the year, just to sort of spread that awareness, as well as our area managers that manage a pod of developments each around the country, and they're our advocates for really selling the stories into our developments to make sure that awareness piece is driven forward.
Thank you. And again, that leads us neatly into the question around really what this partnership means for both Hourglass and Churchill. And following on from that is, how did the partnership come about? And really, how are you both going to optimise the benefits that it brings? And as Churchill has done an awful lot of the talking for the last few minutes, I'm going to hand over to Richard and Veronica to give you a break before asking you to answer the question.
Veronica, do you want to kick off?
Well, if you want to just talk maybe about how the partnership came about.
Well, actually, the partnership came about through our colleague Nick Kelly, who was instrumental in setting up the initial meetings with Churchill. And I think it was one of those situations that doesn't happen very often, actually, in the charity sector, where you meet a group of people and you immediately see the synergy that's there and the obvious nature. And I was lucky enough to go to an Hourglass event last week, or maybe it was a week before, actually. And aside from the partnership, I don't think very many people in the room had heard of us either. But by the end of it, you know, for example, Hourglass was looking for a base or an office in the south of England, and one of the people who had been invited by Churchill to the event immediately said, "Well, we might be able to help you there." So it's the thing about working with a corporate, whether they have a foundation or not, is that it opens up a completely different mindset, which Hourglass for the last 5 or 6 years has been in firefighting mode. Not so much now, where we have some surety of finance, but previous to that, we had done a lot of firefighting. So therefore, a lot of our time had been, how do we deal with the influx of casework? How do we change our working model to ensure that we can create the most impact? How do we work with government? And sometimes those answers are rather siloed when you're only speaking to people in the third sector. When you're talking to someone in the corporate sector, where certainly not just business acumen and business strategy is different. No matter how many times you hear a charity leader say that charities are business-like, we're not, because we're not as much as we should be, because we're here to make a difference in a particular sphere of community. We're here to work with victim survivors. We're here to work with their families. We're here to create lobbying opportunities. But we don't actually spend a lot of the time thinking about what the bottom line is. We're so busy trying to swim sometimes against the tide, especially with different governments across the UK, that the bottom line is missed. So talking to a corporate, talking to somebody who has the right motives, or has the right objectives from an altruistic perspective is a real boon for us. It's a real opportunity for us. So I had a couple of interviews with Churchill. I met, I think, most of the team, and I've only just recovered from that interview. But at the same time, I was fortunate enough to go back to a part of England, where I was a cub journalist in the 90s, around Brockenhurst and Ringwood and round there. So it was lovely to go back. Bizarrely, one of the receptionists at one of the team at Churchill remembered me from being a journalist in the Leamington Times, which was very odd. But it was lovely to come back and see the work that Churchill are doing, and just to underline, I really believe that this will be an impactful partnership, and I do believe that the more charities that can add corporates to their community, the more opportunities there are to diversify how they grow their business. And I think that's probably the message that we're very keen to get across. This isn't about us. This is an altruistic relationship, and I think that's a very refreshing approach from a corporate perspective.
Thank you, Richard. Veronica.
Well, I suppose just thinking about what this means for Hourglass is, I just think there's so much synergy really between what we're trying to achieve as two different organisations in this partnership. You know, Ian mentioned earlier on about taking ownership of choices, and older people, you know, doing that at an earlier age to fare better. But I think that's one of the things Hourglass does very well for older victim survivors, is that we do empower older people. I think I completely agree with Ian that choice is so important. And alongside that, information and education as well, so that older people have the ability to make the best decision for their circumstances. And that's what Hourglass does for every victim survivor that comes to us for help and support. We will understand their needs, we will assess their level of risk, and we will give them, excuse me, we will provide them with a range of options. I think it's really important to say that for many older people who are disclosing abuse, there is a lot of misunderstanding about what happens post-disclosure. And a lot of older victim survivors believe that the only alternative to living or putting up with the abuse is to move into a care home. And that's not the case. And we have a huge piece of work to do around that. And, you know, for Hourglass, and myself included, having a better understanding of independent living and what that means and what that offers, and, you know, being able to promote, you know, that as another alternative for older people, something that they can think about. And that fits very neatly with me too, in terms of a safer aging agenda, because, you know, we want to always be promoting what does safer aging look like for me, at my stage of life. What does it look like for someone in their late 50s? You know, we need to start having those conversations, as Ian said, at a much younger age. We need to be thinking ourselves, what do I want my safer older age to look like? So it's all of those things where I just see where the two organisations are coming together, and I think we can do an awful lot of good for older people right across the UK.
Thank you. Ian, Emma, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I think, sorry, and from our side, when we were going down the route of picking a partner charity, we had a pot of funds that we'd been building over the last couple of years, because we really wanted to make a lot of impact. And we were thinking, you know, do we go down the route of building somewhere because we're developers and we should build something and put our stake in the ground from a charity perspective of what we can support? But for us, Hourglass just resembled everything that we're trying to achieve and trying to, you know, do within our business as well as within the charitable side. And I think there's longer impact that can happen over a longer period of time of working together rather than doing something here and now. So we really felt that, you know, it was a great place to be and a good starting point now this year, and looking forward to what this year looks like by the end of this year. That's what I'm really excited to seeing that impact and how that develops.
Ian, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, maybe just a couple of kind of tangible things that we've got in the pipeline in terms of things that we're planning to kind of bring this to life and add extra benefit. We run some pretty big charity events throughout the year. One of them's a big kind of corporate shooting event that we have, and we're keen to get Hourglass along to that so they can meet some of our business partners. And also I mentioned our kind of network of, over 10,000 customers across the country. We're quite keen to create Hourglass champions at some of our developments who can really kind of take the lead on representing Hourglass and leading on grassroots level fundraising events at our developments, and we're hoping to tie in with a big nationwide event across all our developments where we hold some form of fundraiser for Hourglass to raise awareness as well as money across all our developments. So we're looking forward to making that happen.
Thank you. I think that all those contributions are incredibly positive and really just demonstrate what an exciting partnership this is going to be going forward. We've got another question in the question and answer, which is actually, I think it's more of a statement, but I'm still going to ask you a question around it. And I hope EH, who put the question in, will allow me that flexibility. So EH is talking about successive governments ignoring our older population. I think that's a tick in the box. That's quite true. Aging is not seen as cool and trendy, definitely not. And really it's just identifying the struggles that older people in communities can face. So the question I'm pulling out of that is, what are both Hourglass and Churchill going to be doing proactively through this partnership to be tackling those wicked issues around, nobody wants to age, but the alternate's not great. And how do older people put trust in organisations such as Hourglass and Churchill Foundation when their trust has been shattered in so many of the other organisations that have purported to support and represent them? So I don't know who wants to jump in on that one first.
From the trust point of view, I think from a Churchill Living side, we believe highly in our owners that live in our developments. So we always say to people that are interested in moving into one of our developments, come for a coffee morning, meet everybody at the development, let them be the spokesperson rather than us, because they're going to give you the truth of how they felt the move went and the importance, get back in the room again, and the importance of their true opinion of the impact that it's made on them making that move. And we've always had such incredible feedback from anybody that's moved into our developments. We also do take some of our residents on our launch events as well. So ones that have recently moved in at different developments, we welcome them to come to launch events of a development that may be close by. And they can speak with the owners or speak with potential purchasers and let them know that it's not as scary and a bigger deal as you think. Like once you've made that stepping stone step to get into the development, you really will be pleased with the outcome afterwards. So that's my point. We've our Trustpilot and our owners really sell us and how we are here. Yes, we are a business, but everybody that works for the business really does believe in the product that we develop to make sure that we give the best service we possibly can to the people moving into our developments. Ian, anything to add?
Thank you, Ian. Anything to add?
Sorry, just unmute myself. I was going to pick up on Andrew's point about it not being very trendy to think about getting older, and none of us like to kind of think about it. And I did touch on this earlier, but we spend a lot of time really campaigning or really banging the drum on how much older people actually do still have to contribute and how much older people do have to offer. a lot of our customers are still very active. You know, some of them still work, some of them are still volunteering in the community to really into old age. And I know Hourglass's focus is probably much more on the more vulnerable and the less active members of society. But I think I was talking to one of our owners who was 100 the other day, and we did a little press interview, and he was asked, what's your secret to living a healthy old age? And he said, it's been keeping busy. You know, I worked until I was in my 80s. I still have lots on my agenda every day. I try and keep myself busy. I talk to people. I show an interest in learning new things. So that's really important. And I was going to kind of highlight a few little stats that we always like to talk about the social and the economic benefits of what we do. So I'll just fire those off now. And sorry if this bores everyone, but I think it's quite important, you know. And there's a whole spectrum of different types of older people's housing, from what we do right through to the more kind of care home orientated aspects of it. But in terms of what we do, when we're looking to build a new development in a new town, we quite often face apathy, you know, sometimes even opposition from local people who can't see the benefit of having a 40 or 50 new apartments full of older people moving into their town. You know, we get ageism, we get comments like, oh, they'll just be putting a strain on our local health services. You know, we don't need people coming in. These people are already living in your area. We're just giving them opportunities to live somewhere more suitable. And we've had independent research that's been done by our kind of industry body that shows, you know, over £200,000 of health and social care costs can be saved by enabling people to live more independently, more safely. You know, they're less likely to have a fall. If they do go into hospital, they can come out more quickly and they can go back to living independently rather than going into hospital and, you know, perhaps never coming out again. They'll spend loads of money on the local high street, £350,000 a year of extra spending from an average development, benefiting local shops and services. And they'll free up houses. You know, everyone will downsize. There'll be at least 2 further moves up the chain. You know, people who don't want to see retirement housing in their town because they think that we need more houses for young people. Well, guess what? Everyone who moves into one of those apartments will leave behind a family home, and someone will move into that, and then another home will get freed up down the chain. 2 out of 3 moves into one of our apartments leads to a first-time buyer getting on the ladder at another house elsewhere down the line. So those are just a few of the benefits. There's lots more, but in terms of going back to the question, you know, what older people still have to offer, and the benefits of looking after our older population and helping them stay active and engaged in our society. It's not sexy, but it's really, really important. It's something we believe in.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, again, there's such cohesion between the values and principles that the Churchill Foundation is representing and those of Hourglass. If somebody's living in an abusive relationship, they're not going to be optimizing their potential. They're not going to be able to participate in the community, and they're not going to be living a happy and safe older age. Sorry, Richard, can I hand over to you?
Actually, there was a key question you asked, which is about trust, I think, within. So that the questioner was talking about how do we ensure trust in organisations like ours as well, like Hourglass. And I think it's something that Veronica and I have discussed a great deal, because there is a big difference between a charity trying to be innovative and businesslike and taking unnecessary risks. And what we've tried to do over the last 5 or 6 years is to be innovative in our approach without taking undue risks, or more importantly, remembering that it's not our money. You know, we have been granted this money to try to make a difference to people's lives. So there are things that I can point out in the past. Our previous chief exec called out a large charity in the past about partnering with an organisation that did equity release schemes, for example. And, and I know that there have been insurance partnerships done in the past where the charity will take a cut of that insurance. And that's not how we want to work. For us, we're more about raising the profile, about being a voice for older victim survivors. And whilst we do want to grow what the charity does, we want to grow it by proving the model and underlining how we can work with the public purse from a Home Office perspective, but also with voluntary income like that we're receiving from the Churchill Foundation to make that heat map of support across England and Wales bigger and bigger and bigger. And likewise, from a charity perspective in Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. So we have always been an ethical organisation. We've always challenged, and we also challenge government more than you'd expect a funded organisation to do, because we do receive more than about £500,000 from government per year. So, but we will challenge government. And I think that's a sign of an organisation or a charity you can trust when our morals are so fixed around trying to make a difference, trying to create that broader heat map of support, expanded heat map and support, and taking on altruistic partnerships like this. So I think that's probably our answer to the trust question.
Veronica, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yes, I completely agree that successive governments have completely let down older people and failed to prioritise them and their needs. And in actual fact, what has happened is there's been a hierarchy of victim created over the last few years where older people remain very much last in line for any kind of help and support. I also think the government have been sleepwalking into like an ageing crisis. We have been warning for years. We've known for years that we have a rapidly ageing population. In some parts of England, there will be more people over 60 than under 16 in 5 years' time by 2030. And in almost all parts of the United Kingdom, there will be more over 60s than under 16s by 2050. We're not addressing the needs of this population. We're sleepwalking through this. And I suppose there needs to be a delicate way of phrasing this. Funding for charities needs to follow the demographics. And I am not in favour of children and young people's organisations receiving less. But I think Hourglass and organisations that are working with more and more older people, certainly that needs to be looked at. I was really interested in your point, Ian, about the 100-year-old. The oldest helpline caller that the charity's ever supported was a woman of 100 years of age, and she found the charity's number when she was online surfing the internet, and she came across the charity's website and she started to read through the different pages, and it was only at that moment in time that she realised that what she was being subjected to by her brothers was actually abuse, and that there was an organisation there that was able to help her. So I'm not denying that there is a digital divide, and I think that's a whole separate issue. But I completely agree. We have to stop seeing older people as a burden, and actually just your research and your statistics, far from boring, actually gave me a whole raft of ideas on a piece of work that Hourglass and Churchill could really get stuck into around that whole ageism piece, because that's what it is. So yeah, I've loads of ideas to talk to you about, Ian.
Superb.
And I think it's this fundamental issue around ageism that it's actually the wicked issue in the room, because it's acceptable to discriminate against older people on so many fronts. When it comes down to even basic things like insurance and travel insurance and life insurance, it should be much more rigorously looked at as how it's just completely societally accepted to discriminate against older people. And I think that's where some of the larger charities have lost their trust in older people, because there's a well-known phrase that we use in the disability lobby in Wales, and that's that nothing about us without us. And I do think a number of the larger charities have actually forgotten what they're there to do. And that is actually to be able to reflect what aging is like now. They're very focused on the protection and to some degree the actual depersonalization and perpetual discrimination and somehow actually disabling older people because of the ways in which they want to protect rather than support. And I think that's something, again, that Hourglass has really got at its core. It's about what older people want and need and enabling them to have that level of autonomy and agency that some other charities just don't do because they don't want to talk about older people being victims of rape, because let's call it what it is. They don't want to talk about older people being stolen from by their children and grandchildren because they're just things that society finds completely unpalatable. So I think, you know, a partnership of this kind is a massive opportunity to be able to right some of those wrongs that older people have been subjected to just because of how we want to think about older people. And the stereotype that we like to have of older people is as being that homogenous, sanitized, sterile group that need to be looked after rather than facilitated to live independent lives. Sorry, another of my hobby horses. Richard, would you like to come in on any of that?
No, I was just actually I was just going to make an administrative point because I don't think we've said this yet about the webinar, in the respect that the webinar is going to be available on YouTube after this call, after this event. And clearly, if anybody is either watching this back or is on the call now, you can learn more about Hourglass on our website, which is www.wearehourglass.org, and obviously learn more about Churchill and what they do on churchillliving.co.uk. I think I've got that right, Ian. And likewise, this is one of just a series of webinars that takes place throughout the year on a variety of issues. And I know they've got more and more popular and people watch them on YouTube and otherwise. But if you've got any questions that come from what's been said today, then feel free to email us at inquiries@wearehourglass.org, and we'll certainly come back to you with any questions you might have about whether it's about safer aging or whether it's about Churchill. We can make the link there. Other than that, we will be updating more about things like what Ian mentioned about the charity shoot in the year, about what we're doing with the COVID inquiry tomorrow, and about other partnership-based activities will be on all of our socials. Yeah, I think that should give people lots of ways in to learn more.
Thank you, Richard. I should never be
Churchill Foundation. It's also on churchillfoundation.org.uk.
Thank you, Richard. I should never be trusted with administrative arrangements because I get way too carried away with the content. But yeah, that's just really to thank everybody for engaging with us today. It's been really great. And if there's no further questions, I'll just reiterate what Richard has said, that this information is available on YouTube. Anybody that's participated in the seminar will have it emailed out to them, and really just take the opportunity to engage with both organisations. Because again, the message I would like to promote is as we say to children, safeguarding is everybody's responsibility. And we all are aware of how important safeguarding issues are with regards to children. Let's not forget that those issues apply across the whole of our population in terms of safeguarding people from the risk of abuse. So thank you very much to all of the participants.
Thank you.
And if there's no further questions, then I think we'll call the session closed. But thank you to the panel. It's been really interesting. It's why I got carried away and forgot about the admin stuff. Sorry, Richard. But it's been really, really interesting. And thank you for the questions that have been put forward in the Q&A as well. I think they've helped to in a really productive direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.